You're listening to the Onside Podcast, the podcast for innovation-driven entrepreneurship here in Atlantic Canada. I'm your host, Alex McCann, and this is Season 2, Episode 17. And in this episode, we're taking a look at the journey to create a climate-adaptive technology company here in Nova Scotia. Our guest today is Matt Mizzi, founder and CEO of Drinkable, the world's first accurate, affordable, and easy-to-use handheld water testing device. Matt has a degree in environmental science from Acadia University. He's a venture capital enthusiast, and he is hyper passionate about ethics, truth, and environment. Matt, thanks so much for joining us here on the Onside Podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much. Excited.
Okay, awesome. Well, we always start off with giving our guests an opportunity to share a little bit about themselves. And I thought we could start off by getting to know you a little bit more. And so I'd love for you to tell our listeners, who is Matt?
I honestly have no idea where to start on that one. But I think, origins are important, but maybe we'll get there eventually. I'm an environmental scientist by education. And I stumbled into the world of venture capital, which is the fine art of begging strangers for lots of money to fix what you want to fix and produce a company that can achieve that. And I think that was the light bulb moment for me, was learning that there is an opportunity to get that money and to fix the problems in the world that you want to fix. And I'd seen my father done it before. Mm-hmm. So I knew it was possible. And I think that's a big part of the whole journey, is knowing that it's possible when you first start off. And yeah, I think the origin part of that is my mom is a fine art specialist. So she's a very sensitive person, a very liberal person, a very caring person. And my dad is a bull.
Okay.
And he's they're both incredibly intelligent. And, he leans more to the right generally. And having two parents that were cooperative with their differences and both gave each other the opportunity to teach me what they thought was valuable, I think gave me a lot of the skill sets to understand very different perspectives and work with lots of different types of people. And again, my dad showed me that it's possible. So I think that's at the root of a lot of that.
Okay. So you have kind of a yin and yang kind of thing happening in your family that's pulling you in different directions.
Absolutely.
And so your company Drinkable is focused on water technology. But was there somebody who inspired you to become an entrepreneur? Like what, or a person or something, like what drove you to become an entrepreneur? Because you have this science kind of background. Not all scientists decide to, not all scientists decide to also be interested in venture capital. And then even if you are, not all scientists decide to start a company. Was there somebody or an event that made you interested in entrepreneurship?
Well, my father, an electrical engineer by trade, started his own company shortly before I was born, and it was electronics testing. And, at the beginning, I think one of their first contracts was testing airbags for Ford. And over time and dealing with many different companies, that grew to start testing 70% of the world's airbags. So it became a huge company. He became the CEO of that company, and seeing him, and it was a painful experience. Like every day at the dinner table, he was talking through, verbally trying to digest how to turn himself from the electrical engineer to a leader of people, how to set the culture and the tone of the company, what's appropriate, what's not appropriate. And that's an immense learning opportunity for someone like myself. And he showed me that, he's the son of two people who at the time could barely speak English. He didn't do well in school, but was a savant, so to speak, very good at electronics and math, and like crazy good. And he really did set the example that you can start with almost nothing, teach yourself and turn yourself into somebody that people look up to.
So you said so where are your parents from then? You said your dad grew up in a home where his parents did not speak English. So where were they from, and how did that that must have been quite a journey to have that kind of background and then try to make a place for yourself here in Canada.
Yeah, I think my dad's genetically lucky in that he can digest stress in a way that would make most people feel jealous.
Okay.
But his parents came from Malta, and that's, I think, historically relevant given the Ukraine situation, because until very recently, Malta was the most bombed place in the world for an extended period of time. So I think there was like 200 days of straight bombing.
Wow.
There was nothing left of a very vibrant and beautiful culture. And my grandfather fought in that war and lost a lot of people that he was very close with. And him and his wife, who he had one child with at the time, maybe two, I believe it was just my aunt that was born already. And they took two separate boats over to, they thought they were landing in New York. They landed in Hamilton, Ontario. Very different place. And he became a plumber and, did the best he could for his kids. And my dad engineering wasn't attractive at the time, but it was what he was crazy about. He couldn't stop building things and making things. And he made his own calculator in high school when they didn't really exist. And he made his own personal computer in university. And he was just that sort of person. And just he just couldn't be stopped when he put his mind to something. So I don't really know who his hero was, so to speak, who set the example for him. But it didn't appear that was overly necessary, just that both him and his father could metabolize stress immensely well and put it to good use.
So he had this, your grandparents and then your parents had this very stressful, dynamic kind of existence moving here and trying to start anew. And your father had, you called him a savant, a keen engineering kind of brain or problem solver, really, trying to solve all kinds of things. And he creates a company, grows really, really successfully and big and is doing all kinds of things. And you get to sit around the table watching him trying to move from being kind of the technical problem solver to that kind of business leader, trying to lead a team and those kinds of things. It sounds like that was really important for you as you kind of digested some of that.
Well, absolutely, from all sorts of different perspectives. The other perspective that I didn't mention is that because he was doing electronics testing for all sorts of companies that became vibrant themselves or were already vibrant, I got to see really ugly prototypes.
Oh.
Terrible prototypes. And then they became Xbox 360s, and then they became Teslas, and then they became Segways, and then they became Tasers. So I got to see those things in their ugliest form with lawyers who were proud of those ugly forms. And they knew that at the end of the tunnel there was light, so they kept working at it and kept refining. And so I'm not embarrassed when our prototypes are ugly. And I'm really proud of our team when they find problems. And that's definitely set by the kind of the examples that, I was running around with like 60 very good engineers. I teach some of them how to unicycle sometimes. Like they kind of half babysat me. There would be military projects that were blacked out in the corner that I never heard about, probably for good reason. And I think being exposed to that it really, really does make it possible from a mindset perspective.
Well, so you, I think that's really important because in a early stage company, startup company, there's a lot of trying and failing a lot before, you become successful or make the product. I mean, I just think about the iPhone. There's like a new one every year. And I don't know if I had the original iPhone, but I had one of the early ones, and there's that constant improvement or constantly trying to make something then better than it was. But you got to see things before even the released version. So yeah, probably with the wires and all those things coming out.
I probably shouldn't mention it, but I was playing on a prototype Xbox 360 before people knew that they were coming out. So it was, I got some privilege to go along with it.
Yeah.
It felt pretty cool.
Yeah, I bet. I have a teenager. I've got a couple teenagers kicking around, and they're now permanently addicted to Xbox 360, amongst other things. So I guess I should thank you or not thank you for that, or your father for getting that out the door in the world. I guess it's good. It's all good. It's all good. So you have a scientific background, or you got into science. Were you always interested in science? Did your father and your mother, did they kind of inspire you to be interested in science, or what got you interested in science?
I think disagreements at the dinner table were common and encouraged. And I think that pushed me to Google things as a teenager. And that was like the heyday of Google. You could Google something, you get a real answer. You get the actual answer, not like an ad-fed answer.
Fair enough.
So it was amazing because if I wanted to pursue something from a scientific perspective, like I enjoyed reading abstract as a 15-year-old to 16-year-old scientific abstracts for papers. And I think this is a weird angle to take on it, but my mom got very sick when I was about 10 or 11, and she was more or less in the hospital for a number of years after that. And my dad was very busy. So I had I think golden years up to that point, like the perfect childhood. Everything was taken care of. My grandparents were a few blocks away. I could walk over if I wasn't getting along with my parents, truly magical. But I think going into puberty, all of a sudden with my parents not really being present, they were now taking care of themselves in their own way. There was a lot of self-teaching that was required from a psychology perspective, from a human sexual perspective, all of those things. I learned a lot of that through the golden age of Google. And I know that sounds kind of unusual, and maybe it's not everyone's cup of tea, but it was, I actually look back on those years fondly, and I think that trend continued. I wasn't hell-bent on science, but I didn't want to take something that wasn't functional, functional in the workplace per se. I wanted an education that I could get, and environmental scientists they have a hands-on job now. They can go into the field and do work, and that was attractive to me. So there was always a search for truth and research, and I think that fit the scientific mold pretty well.
Interesting. And this idea of I like that, trying to think of, and I know a lot of young people are trying to figure out, what does the future hold? Where should I go? What should I spend my time on? A lot of people are concerned about climate emergency. Do they want to be an activist? Do they want to be a scientist? All of these kinds of things. And did your interest, I was kind of looking at some of the things that you've done in your life, and you've traveled quite a bit and seen the world and gone to a lot of different places. Did that get you interested, and with your kind of your extensive Googling on many subjects, pre-fake news and conversations about truth, is kind of that curiosity and your science background, is that what kind of got you interested in sustainability, or what kind of piqued your interest around that?
I think I was, because of the research I was digesting, I was well aware of issues long before they were public enough for me to have an outlet with my peers or my parents. They thought I was nuts. Before the climate thing really caught on, I was, I'm having trouble getting out of bed in the morning. I don't think people realize how many people are going to die and suffer through this. And I'd try to bring it up with people that I looked up to, and they're like, oh my God, another kid that's fallen on the liberal side of the fence or something.
I think you told me that you had a Waldorf education. They were probably like, oh, here's another Waldorf hippie to try to
Yeah, exactly. So you're familiar with Waldorf then?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting education for sure. And my mom was actually a part of the school on the admin side, and that had its own complications and benefits. But
Okay. Interesting. Well, it sounds like the conversations around the dinner table, your traveling and experience, your extensive Googling and, trying to understand the world around you really had a impact in terms of kind of your outlook and where you wanted to go. And you've created this company, Drinkable, which is focused on water testing and water technology. And your company has done so great over the last couple of years. When was your company founded?
That would be about
early. You're still early stage company, but
I think 3 years.
3 years, okay.
It's not a hard start, so it's kind of like when is the start? Because it was a hobbyist focus on water, which turned into this I was just reading abstracts, and I combined the two abstracts, and I said, "There's a solution here for very affordable water treatment." And then reached out to a researcher on the West Coast, and we were bouncing ideas off each other, and this is incredible. We can make this a really cheap treatment solution for remote communities in Canada that might fit the Indigenous situation pretty well, their water crisis. And very quickly realized that the testing was the greatest bottleneck to reducing the cost. So not having the information of what the water is, you don't really know what you can do to it. You need to be testing it frequently. You need to send people who have extensive education, often receiving remote pay or danger pay, and it adds up. In a lot of cases, there are actual rules or laws or policies that prevent certain companies from, if they've ever interacted with water that's on First Nations land, they now have to carry it off the land. It's not even allowed to touch the soil.
Okay.
And the cost of that in some of those remote communities makes that enormous. That's an enormous cost. So if you can test it, ensure that it's safe to put back on the soil, even in that regard, that's a huge step forward. So it started off as, it would be really cool if we could, there's about 300 communities in Canada who could benefit from this extensively. It'd be really cool if we could get it to them. So then we started researching what technology was required to pull that off. And it hadn't been developed yet. So we put a rough idea together of what it would cost to develop that technology, because it's like right there. We're almost there. So if we can push it over the line, then we can have that solution at our fingertips. And in the process of determining what that dollar figure was, how we were going to get the dollar figure, I started to learn that this is the good end of the spectrum in Canada. That a lack of, so the one statistic I always revisit is easily preventable illness leads to half of all global hospitalizations. It's the easily preventable part that is scientifically defined. So if that person knew that there was something wrong with the water and knew what it was, half of medical complications could be avoided.
Yeah.
So that became like a very easy metric to look at as a proxy for the global situation. And it became much more than just the 300 communities I was originally focused on. And now we're very much trying to develop a device that anybody can use with the press of a button. In a few minutes, you'll know what's in there. You'll know what it'll do to your health, and you'll know what you can do to prevent those health implications.
Yeah. Well, it's definitely, even if you're a person who's camping, is a very straightforward example, and you pass by a stream and you're like, oh, I wonder if I could just, fill up my my water canteen and keep moving here. And there's always a moment where you're like, can I do that? Can I not do that? Water looks clean. Is it? Or is it full of pathogens that are going to I'm going to be keeled over in a few minutes? So the ability to test and make sure that water is clean and safe is really critical for many communities. As you were thinking about this idea, you did some research, identified a really, really keen problem, and you thought, okay, this is something that needs to be addressed. And decided to put a company together, and now I think I just mentioned that you guys have won the Bio-Innovation Challenge recently. I think that was last week. You guys won $55,000 for that. So congratulations on your win there.
Thank you.
But you don't go from that kind of just idea or research paper or, things or a few conversations to creating a company and then, winning challenges. What were some of the steps that you took to kind of create your company and move along that path? Like, I know you've been involved with a few accelerators. I know you've done some things like that. Can you tell some of our listeners, some of the things that you did to kind of arrive at this point in time? I know it's still kind of early, and 3 years, is not that long of a time, but you guys are making some excellent strides.
Yeah, to start off, I think it's important to say also for entrepreneurs who are maybe only a year in or a year and a half in, that like the first year and a half is by far the most painful for me anyways. It's like everybody's telling you it's not possible. It wouldn't be wanted even if it was possible. You don't have a leader of your team yet. So you're all not really fighting, but nothing moves fast. It's a round table every single decision. So like all of these things, like you've all got ideas. You don't necessarily know what those teammates are good or bad at. If you're in a situation like me where I actually met my co-founders at a hackathon. So I met them in the lobby of the Aqua Hacking Challenge, the Atlantic Aqua Hacking Challenge. And because I had already been focused on the community developments in terms of water treatment, when they proposed water testing for wells in Nova Scotia, I'm like, that's perfect. And then looked into the market size for wells and saw that it was perfect for us. But that took a long time to convince people. And it took a long time to convince myself. Like that, those are really, COVID was just started to rear up when we started the company. I think I was just about to turn 30. I'm like, am I supposed to be doing this right now? Like, or should I be doing something more serious, so to speak, in quotation marks? And I'm glad I stuck through it. But those questions are painful questions when you don't have much certainty. But I think given my background, a little bit of biology, a little bit of chemistry, a little bit of geology, and some policy, human health understandings, and then the venture capital side, it just, I felt like I didn't have a choice. Like I needed to stick at this, and it just got better as we believe, as more people believe and more people support, and the energy goes up, then it becomes self-sustaining. Then it's easy to chase the dream as long as there's enough money to keep everybody happy. And those are the good years. Like these are the good years right now for us. I can tell this is a small team. We love what we're doing, and we see that path to success. So
okay. Yeah. And how has being kind of in the Nova Scotia innovation ecosystem impacted you? Because, we have a kind of new and growing ecosystem there. And I know you're from Ontario originally. I don't know if you did any kind of entrepreneurial stuff out there, but how do you feel that the Nova Scotia ecosystem has kind of supported you, or what's it like here?
Well, I think for a little bit of context, through Acadia, I was part of Acadia's venture capital investment team for the venture capital investment competition. It was classified as the Canadian Nationals, but there was like 6 universities. So we did win that. And I didn't even know what venture capital was before that. And then we were the only Canadian team that got to go to the US Nationals. And I learned a lot through that process because those were real companies and real VCs. And the lessons I learned through the venture capital investment competition is that Canada as a whole, and especially Atlantic Canada, does have some challenges. It does have some pitfalls and some things that need to be accounted for. But on the flip side is this small community that is still small enough that everybody knows each other. Everybody wants to help. Everybody's willing to help. And federal programs don't seem to be biased on where you are. So we've had amazing federal help. Like, I don't think a lot of people realize that you can get like hundreds of thousands of dollars from the government in different ways if you want to fix something with the world. And that just that belief or that hope can be really powerful. You just have to ask and figure out how to ask. But yeah, it's been amazing to be part of frankly, a small ecosystem that's really driven to see change. But it has been challenging with that size on the money side. So we know that going past the seed stage investment, going past the $2 million investment is going to require either some voodoo magic, or getting money from outside the ecosystem. So that's where the challenges come in, where if you want to take that risk of becoming a big company, which makes the risk worthwhile to other investors, you do have to plan to take money from outside the ecosystem at some point for now.
Yeah. And I think that landscape is getting better. Like the last few years has been a active effort to bring in more angels, to bring in more VC, to create opportunities for other kinds of investment vehicles in the region. But you're right, it has been a struggle, and to take your company bigger, or to scale the company so that it's a globally relevant company, probably will require some of that broader thinking and access to broader investors. Hopefully we can have some ones from here in Atlantic Canada, but getting you ready for that journey. And as you kind of think about that, and I was wondering if you might, we were talking about a little bit about the ups and downs and trying to figure out what it's like to, bring a team together, figure out each other's strengths and weaknesses. And, being an entrepreneur is not easy. A lot of stress. It was, you mentioned kind of at the beginning of your comments, and you saw it with your father, and running a business and trying to manage people, and it takes a lot of resilience. I feel like in the last couple of years, everyone loves that word. How are we going to make our companies resilient, our economy, our people, our society? How are we going to recover? But I wonder if you might share with our listeners any thoughts that you might have around resilience and as you think about rebounding from things that didn't work out, products, things like that. How does that affect you, and how do you think about it for going forward?
Well, there is one moment in time that I think is a great example. And leading up to that moment, I'd had like a lot of success in business competitions. A big part of that was luck, but that's what I got used to regardless of the reasons behind it. And we went into the Apex International Business Competition. At the time, our company name was What the Well. It's just a fun one. Because we were so focused on well water. And we came like 4th or 5th or something. And it was like shattering to me. I think resilience has two sides. We all wanted to quit. we all admitted that to each other later, that like the three of us were like, this isn't fun. We put so much work into this, and it's just like, we're invisible. And what we didn't realize is that one of the judges later invested in us. This was our first investor, and it wasn't long after that. But we almost walked away. I think it would have been like 2 days after that, probably, that we all kind of hit the line where we said, this is too much. But the resiliency side for me is, I think the other two teammates took their foot off the gas a little bit. And after 2 days of wallowing, I kind of said, like, for lack of a better phrase, like, you know, like, F this. I'm going to, like, I know this is going to work. I'm going to prove everybody wrong. And I think there's all sorts of ways to motivate yourself. But every time there's been a low point, I am like more energized coming out of the low point than I was before the low point. So those 2 days are always extremely savage for me. I mean, I'm so hard on myself. And I've recently spoken to a couple other founders about that in other competitions where, like, when things don't go to plan, even at second place, it really hurts. When in your mind, you've been doing all of the work with the fantasy of that image of you being first in mind and taking your company just a little bit further. So resiliency can have its dark moments too. I don't think it's all good, but I think it may be healthy for most people to give up in that situation, because the year after that was really hard. And I think about half of my friends would come out of that for the worst. So I think there's the appropriate style and amount of resilience for each situation, for each person.
Well, that's really interesting. It's I can imagine that's pretty devastating, not getting, you know, if you were the 4th or 5th place. I'd imagine if you were like the 10th or the 20th place. But yeah, you do have those moments where you're pushing everything, you know, all of your intelligence, all of your drive, all of your work. And sometimes it doesn't play out the way you want. There's usually one or two that make it through. But what I'm kind of hearing is you dusted your shoulders off and said, you know, is this what I want to do? And kind of doubled down on it. And that's really hard to do. So I commend you. And, you know, hopefully you'll keep finding those wells of resilience.
There you go.
I had to get that in there.
Well, it worked. It worked beautifully.
Well, I wanted to, we're close to our time. I have one last little question that we always like to ask our guests on the podcast here, and that is around entrepreneurship. Nurture or nature? What do you think?
I would be, I think, doing a disservice to a lot of people if I were to claim that this was nature, that I was just like born to do this. And I think that's frankly ludicrous. And there's an example that I frequent, which is a really weird example and a memory to go back to. But I went through university with a group of friends from Truro, Nova Scotia, and they didn't have the same upbringing as I did. And whenever we'd think about changing something, they didn't think it was possible. And I'm talking about like put a washer and dryer and find a new outlet and like do some electrical and find somewhere to drain the water. That was an impossible task that would be laughed at. And I'm just like, my dad changes something in the house every day. And after I kind of digested that for a bit, I realized that there's a lot of people in this world and they didn't grow up in a disprivileged situation. They're quite lucky in the grand scheme of things. And still, they had seen so many things not work because of the environments that they were in, that was their mindset. So there's a huge aspect of nurture that comes in for me, because I saw that it's possible through my dad. I saw that it was possible with very low amounts of resources. And I think if you don't have someone that looks like you and sounds like you and acts like you accomplishing something, then I think the confidence might not be there. And confidence is really important when you're raising money to get something done. So I would have to lean towards nurture.
Okay. I love that. Well, that is fantastic. I really appreciate your insights and your thoughts today. I really, really enjoyed our conversation. If folks want to learn more about you and about Drinkable, how can they learn more? Where can they find more information?
Well, you can go to our website, which is drinkable.tech, so TECH. And yeah, you can email us there if you have further questions. We do have pre-orders available for our V1, hopefully coming out by the end of the summer. But But yeah, please email us if you have questions. I'd love to hear from you.
Okay, that's awesome. That's awesome. And just want to thank all of our listeners to the Onside podcast. Please follow us, subscribe to the podcast, and you can look at our Inclusive Innovation Monitor, which is available on our website, which is www.onsidenow.ca. And as we come to a close, I'd really like to thank Communities, Culture, and Heritage for your support. We're so grateful for your support in helping us make this podcast. And stay tuned for our next episodes. It'll be out soon. Thanks.
Thanks so much, Alex.
This has been a Podstarter production.